Hey there everybody, it's Wyeth, and we're going to be doing a tier list today. I just want to go ahead and make a quick disclaimer. I'm not one to bash on books. When I created this channel, I wanted to give good book recommendations. So if you check out my sections here, we're going to be going over picking my top 3 basically of all time, but also when it comes to books that weren't really for me, I have it listed as not my cup of tea. And that's because I really just want to make sure that, the authors out there that put their blood, sweat, and tears into books, they put a lot of time and a lot of heart into them. Just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for someone else. So I'm going to be doing my best to give good descriptions of these books, but at the same time, if it wasn't for me, I'm going to be candid. So just something to keep in mind. But let's go ahead and start out this tier list. All right, first up we have, and again, I'm visually impaired, so I'm going to be getting pretty dang close to the computer. We have Defiance of the Fall. Our main protagonist learns basically out of the blue that his world has been combined, which is Earth, by the way, with about 3 or 4 different planets, and now alien forces are trying to incur upon his planet and basically strip mine it for resources. Now, that's just where the series starts. It does not end up there. The 10th book wasn't really for me, but at the same time, the arcs that we do get, especially in book 8, are just phenomenal. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in very enjoyable. Next, we're gonna go with He Who Fights Monsters, another lit RPG, but this is definitely one of my big favorites. There's gonna be no doubt in my mind, if it's, at least in my opinion, it is a must-read. I really do enjoy Jason as a character. This is an Australian man who is transported to another world, so it is an isekai, and he is able to basically reinvent himself since he was, in his own opinion, really not going anywhere in his previous life due to some emotional baggage. And I just gotta say, I love Jason as a character. I know he doesn't bode well with everyone, so that's something to keep in mind, but the stakes only get higher and higher in the series, and I just really, really do enjoy it. I put a couple of these books in here that I read years and years ago, probably going on more than a decade, just kind of as a laugh. But I did really enjoy The Hunger Games. It is young adult, obviously everyone kind of knows that, and I did have some enjoyment from it, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in pretty dang good. And now we come to Jade City. Let's just go ahead, put it where it belongs. It is definitely going to be in my top 3. I love the Greenbone Saga so very much. It is, in my opinion, the perfect series. And though other series, I might be a little higher in my top 3, and they may not be perfect, it's just because they really do vibe with me. But when it comes to what Fonda Lee did here, it truly is so well written. And it starts out in Janloon on a small island, and the magic system is based around Jade, for those of you who do not know. And I'm a sucker for a magic system around an item or a specific material. And it just gets better and better the farther you get in the series, and my goodness, the final book, the 3rd book, is just a heart-wrencher, so it's definitely belongs right on up there. The Lies of Lamora. A phenomenal series. Currently it is not finished, but oh my goodness, it has one of the best friendships out there when it comes to any fantasy series, and I believe another booktuber, Murph, was the one to coin that, and I just completely agree with her. And I would love to put this in my top 3, I really would, but I know for a fact there's some other really good contenders out there. But it is definitely a must-read when it comes to fantasy in general. So if you guys have not checked this one out, it follows a band of thieves, and it's definitely not YA. We'll just keep it at that. All right, we're gonna come over to Enemy of the World. That's the first book in the main protagonist or main character hides his powers. This series had a lot of potential in my eyes. I love the plot to it. I think it's such an interesting idea how you have this hero, or I wouldn't even call him a hero, this protagonist who has a very sordid past, and is trying to basically restart his life, but is very much above the curve of the newbies, I would say, in the section of hell he's currently in. It just, it didn't strike me, so I'm gonna put it as not my cup of tea. I know there's a lot of fans out there for it, and I'm not bashing it, or at least I'm not trying to bash it at all. I just didn't really vibe with the protagonist himself, and, you know, really that's a very big portion of what you need to do to really grab your reader's attention. They need to like the protagonist, and he just wasn't for me. It's not to say this is not a good series at all. I think I DNF'd it halfway into the second book, so I don't mean to call out any shots here, but just something that is my opinion. All right, we are at The King's Dark Tidings. I love this series, and I love it a little bit more than Jade City. Now, it's not a perfect book. I do think in book 3, it kind of has the potential to lose some people, but that's just the author trying to build out the world a little bit more and bringing in some other elements. But other than that, this series just speaks to me so much. Our main protagonist, Reskin, is a young man who, from basically the day he was born, has been secluded in a castle and basically trained in everything you can think of by the masters of their crafts, whether that be swordsmanship, whether that be economics, trade, thievery. Just, you can imagine the best schooling for the world's most charismatic assassin warrior, then this is what you're gonna get from this series. I love it so much. Not a lot of people know about this series, and it's really a sad state of affairs, but it is by far one of my favorite books, if not the favorite series that I have. So again, if you guys have not checked this one out, it is not even a must read, it's a have to read. So just something to keep in mind. All right, jumping over to Mistborn, Brandon Sanderson. This was his series that really did put him on the map. I believe he wrote this after he worked on the Wheel of Times. I don't know, someone fact check me on that if y'all don't mind. But at the same time, this is the one that really put him center stage when it came to being a fantasy author on his own. And it is a very good series. It is definitely a must read, but it's been, my goodness, about 6 years since I've read it, so I'm eventually gonna have to go back one day, probably in the near future, and give it a reread through, as well as make a video on its pros and cons. I know I just finished about less than a year ago the Wax and Wayne series, which is on here, and I just love the Cosmere as a concept. It's the MCU of the narrative universe, and Brandon Sanderson is definitely a great pioneer to kind of set this up. And if you haven't read this, it is again one of the pillars of fantasy. All right, Mother of Learning by Domagoj Krmajic. This is a 4-book series following a little bit of a snobby protagonist in the beginning of the work. It is a time loop series, but instead of the time loop being during just one day repeating itself over and over and over again, it's actually over the course of 1 month's time. Really, the big strength for this book is having the main character obviously grow as a person within quote-unquote such a short amount of time, but also having him really learn the different aspects of the magic around him at the magic school he's currently at, and being able to master them, and in front of people who don't even believe it's possible for him to do this quickly. I wouldn't say it's a must-read, but I definitely would say it is very enjoyable, and I'm gonna put it right after Defiance of the Fall. All right, now we come to Orconomics. This is a trilogy series, and the 3rd book is supposed to come out in the next month or 2. I'm a really big fan of this one so far. It's so funny. It is so funny. The author is able to really give you belly laughs while you're listening to it or reading it, and it's not just resting on the laurels of comedy either. You know, there are some pretty dang emotional scenes in here, and you know, they're taking a very funny idea to some pretty dire circumstances. Just all in all, this series is fantastic. I really did enjoy the second book, Son of a Lich, as well, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this right at the very top of very enjoyable. All right, this is something that I don't think a lot of my audience will know about, but if you do, then color me embarrassed. This is The Potato Factory by Bryce Courtenay. This is not a fantasy series. It's actually a historical fiction series. Bryce Courtenay is a South African author who passed away about a decade ago, and he's actually the person who wrote The Power of One, the movie that came out in the 90s with Morgan Freeman in it. And oh my god, his writing is phenomenal. He can just paint a picture with words and you really do feel like you are just right there with the characters. And in The Potato Factory, the story follows the generations of the Solomon family, starting out in the first book with Ike Solomon, a character based on the notable fencer of stolen items back in the early 18th century of London. And it's basically, in Bryce Courtenay's words, the series is a love letter to Australia, because he was born in South Africa but moved to Australia throughout his middle years. And this is a must-read for me. I love it so much. I'm gonna put it right above He Who Fights Monsters. Now, if it's not your type of genre, it is a historical fiction. I guess that's up to you, but if you're willing to take a chance, definitely give this one a shot. All right, here is Fair Quest. This is a story about a pretty intelligent young man being raised by his grandfather, who is kind of on the shady side, and an immersive game comes out, a VR game, and he learns that he's able to make a little cash by utilizing his chess knowledge. And this concept is really cool to me, though I didn't really fall in love with the protagonist, so I'm gonna put this in pretty dang good. Gonna definitely be at the end of this. I am a sucker for chess. I love chess myself, and I thought, oh, this is just gonna be a home run here. Don't get me wrong, the story is pretty good, but it does have a very YA feel to it, which is something I've been trying to avoid recently, so that's why it's going to be sitting right there. When it comes to Delores LLC, I'm gonna put this in very enjoyable. I do really like this lit RPG. It does have a couple quirks with the dialogue, but at the end of the day, the concept itself is phenomenal, with the overarching theme of these two characters being transported to an alien world again, and they are given a task by the god Dolos to basically conquer the planet. But at the end of the day, Dolos has his own ulterior motives, and he is trying to collect his data. And just all in all, I love the concept so much, and the characters themselves are really good. It's a mix between really intense fighting scenes and then dialogue for a lot of it, so that's why it's not a little higher, though I am very much looking forward to some of the extra books that Blaise Corbin will ideally be giving us in this series. All right, next up we have Foundry Side. Foundry Side is a book about a young gal who's a thief living in a pretty sprawling city and is tasked with the theft of an artifact that, well, will get her into a lot of trouble in the future. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Foundry Side. Yeah, it wasn't for me. I don't even know why. Like, the concept is good, the characters were good, but I just couldn't finish it. I read it about a year and a half back, so pardon my memory. I just, it didn't blow me away. I think that's what it came down to. Now, no offense to the author at all. Again, the concept is good. I'm sure this is for a lot of other people as well, but just not my cup of tea. All right, we're gonna go with the Alloy of Law, the Wax and Wane series. Now, I am saying the first book, that's what all these pictures are. I am rating the series as a whole, even if it is not finished yet. I digress. Wax and Wane, it is definitely going to be very enjoyable. I'm gonna put it right behind Orconomics. This is not higher, because I do think Brandon Sanderson was trying to figure out where to go and keeping the Mistborn world alive. Now, I do really enjoy Wax and Wayne as characters, and they do rival the Lies of Lamora friendship to some degree. Such a good series, and the last book definitely did weave all the threads together, so you're not going to be disappointed if you do pick this one up. I had to break this video into part 1 and part 2 due to some editing issues, so if you like the first one, feel free to come on back for number 2. Also, all of the books that you do see will be in the descriptions below as a referred vendor link. So yes, I'll be receiving some cash if you click on that link. Feel free not to do that if you don't want to, totally understandable, but if something does strike your fancy, feel free to check it out.